Chapter 12. The Last Earthrise. The hangar was a tomb in reverse, a place of shelter becoming a grave, with the living still trapped inside. After the first shuttle vanished into the storm, a brittle silence descended, broken only by the relentless shriek of wind through the open doors and the ominous groaning of the mountain. The remaining 30 survivors, a mix of Bastion holdouts, Renn's rebels, and Rook's team, huddled in a relatively stable corner behind a stack of heavy cargo containers. The red emergency lights had failed completely. Now, their world was illuminated by the harsh white beams of portable lamps and the occasional apocalyptic flash of lightning from outside. Kai immediately got to work with the 2 other Wayfarer engineers, rigging a temporary atmospheric seal across the shattered inner doorway leading deeper into the Bastion. The superheated steam from the lower galleries was still rising, a visible, shimmering heat haze that carried the scent of cooked rock and ozone. Without the seal, they'd be poached in their makeshift shelter. Rook moved among the survivors, a lamp in his hand. He checked the wounded. Most injuries were minor: burns from steam, cuts from falling debris, the deep, tremorous shock of near death. The boy he'd rescued, whose name was Emil, was awake now, wrapped in a thermal blanket and sipping electrolyte fluid, his eyes huge and vacant. His mother clutched him, murmuring thanks to Rook over and over, as if the words were a prayer. Renn was kneeling beside a still form in the shadows near the collapsed gantry. Thorne. Rook approached. Thorne was alive, but barely. The fallen rock and metal had crushed his legs and pinned his torso. His breathing was wet and ragged, each inhale a visible agony. His eyes were open, staring at the chaotic ceiling high above. "Silas," Renn said, his voice hollow. Thorne's eyes shifted, finding Renn, then Rook. There was no rage left, no conviction, just pain and a profound, bewildered emptiness. "The garden," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "It was supposed to be pure." "It was just a mountain, Silas," Renn said, his own voice cracking. "And we were just people trying to live in it. We were meant to be more." Thorne's gaze drifted past them into some private distance. "A beacon." "You extinguished it," Rook said, not with malice, but with a cold, final truth. "To keep it from being touched, you smothered it yourself." A long, shuddering breath escaped Thorne. He didn't argue. The fight, the faith, was gone. Only the failing biology remained. He looked at Renn, a desperate, pleading confusion in his eyes. Did we save them? The children?" Renn swallowed hard. "The children are on the shuttle. They're safe. Because of them." He gestured weakly toward Rook and Kai. Thorne's eyes closed. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his temple. Then, "The garden is theirs now." His breath hitched, then smoothed out into a shallow, rhythmic rattle. He didn't speak again. They didn't have the equipment or the stability to move the rubble pinning him. They made him as comfortable as they could with blankets and painkillers from the medkits. He faded in and out of consciousness as the hours crawled by, a dying king in the ruins of his collapsed kingdom. The storm did not abate. If anything, it intensified. Hayes's voice from the Wayfarer was a tense, static-laced lifeline. "Radiation levels are holding just below lethal, but the electromagnetic interference is off the charts. Another CME is hitting the magnetosphere. I can't guarantee shuttle integrity if I launch. You have to sit tight." "How long?" Rook asked, watching a trickle of water, meltwater from the storm, or maybe the first sign of the mountain's internal ice melting, run down the far wall. "Best estimate? 6 to 8 hours until the worst passes. Can you hold?" Rook looked around. The temporary seal was holding back the steam, but the temperature in the hangar was dropping rapidly as the geothermal heat bled away and the storm's frigid upper atmosphere air swept in. They had limited power for heaters, limited food, limited everything. "We'll hold," he said. The wait was a slow-motion exercise in existential dread. The mountain spoke to them in a language of cracks and shudders. Each new groan sent people flinching, eyes wide with terror. They shared rations, nutrient bars from the Wayfarer and the Bastion's remaining stores of hardtack. They told stories in hushed voices, not of the past, but of simple things. A favorite food, a memory of sunshine, the name of a pet. It was a way to assert humanity against the crushing indifference of the rock and the storm. Kai and Renn pored over the Bastion's final systems readouts on a slate. Battery power at 12%, Renn murmured. The polymer scrubbers are offline. CO2 is building again. Slowly, but it's building. The storm is scrubbing the outside air, oddly enough, Kai said, pointing to an external sensor feed that flickered in and out. The rad levels are hellish, but the particulate and CO2 content out there is actually lower than in here. If we could just vent this chamber and filter the outside air for radiation. We can't filter that level of radiation, Renn said. Not with what we have. No, Kai agreed, but we could do a short, controlled purge. Blow the stale air out, let the storm fill the void, then seal up again before the rads accumulate. It's a gamble. The pressure differential might cause more collapses. Rook listened. Another gamble. Another choice with imperfect information. Do it, but on my mark. Coordinate with Hayes. We need to know if there's a momentary lull in the wind shear. I won't have this hangar turned into a wind tunnel. They prepared, moving people to the most sheltered area, reinforcing the temporary seal. Hayes monitored the storm from above, looking for a break in the violent, swirling patterns. I've got a window, she finally said. 90 seconds. The jet stream is shifting. Wind will drop to about 100 kph. It's not calm, but it's the best you'll get. On my mark. In 10. They counted down. At 0, a team of Renn's people manually cranked open a secondary pressure door on the hangar's leeward side, just a crack. The effect was instantaneous. A howling, ice-cold gale ripped through the cavernous space, scouring away the stale, toxic air. Debris flew. People clung to each other and to the cargo containers. For 60 seconds, it was chaos. Then, as the wind began to ramp up again, with an audible rising shriek, they slammed the door shut. The air was now bitingly cold and smelled of lightning and ionized stone. But it was fresh. The suffocating heaviness was gone. They had bought themselves a few more hours. As the storm's fury returned to full strength outside, a new sound joined the symphony of wind and groaning rock. A deep, resonant ping echoed through the hangar, coming from the comm unit on Rook's belt. It was a specific, encrypted alert tone. He pulled it out. It was a text-only burst from the Wayfarer, a forward of a signal Hayes had just picked up. Source: Geneva fragment, Eclipse 7. Message: Query status. Geothermal signature from Alpine region has terminated. Biological signatures in redoubt diminishing. Climate cascade continues unabated. My function is concluding. Do you require final data archive transfer? This is final query. The ghost in the machine was giving up. It had felt its last patient die. Rook looked at the dying Thorne, at the huddled survivors, at the storm-lashed opening of the hangar. Final data archive. The sum total of Earth's managed climate knowledge. The last will and testament of a planetary intelligence. Hayes, he said into his comm. Reply to Eclipse 7. Yes, we require the final archive. Transmit it to the Wayfarer's secure core. Then, thank it, and tell it its function is complete. It can stand down. Understood. A few minutes later, Hayes confirmed. Archive received. It's massive. And the Geneva signal just went silent, not offline. It transmitted a termination protocol and purged its core. It's just a box of cold silicon now. Another death. This one. Quiet and digital. The long night wore on. Thorne's breathing grew fainter, then stopped altogether near the 4th hour. Renn covered his face with a blanket. No one said a word. The prophet was gone, and his paradise had died with him. Batikadiwider. Dawn on a storm-racked Earth was not a sunrise. It was a gradual, grudging lightening of a bruised and furious sky from black to a sickly, toxic green-gray. The wind, however, did drop. The shriek faded to a roar, then to a howl, then to a stiff, constant gale. Shuttle is prepped and launching, Hayes reported. ETA 20 minutes. Be ready to move fast. Radiation is still high, but we've doped the shuttle hull with a lead polymer spray. It'll get you here. Those 20 minutes were the longest of Rook's life. The survivors, knowing rescue was imminent, seemed to fray at the edges. The discipline of fear gave way to the jittery anxiety of hope. People crowded toward the hangar doors, peering out at the insane landscape of churning clouds and lightning-bleached rock. When the shuttle finally appeared, dropping like a stone through the cloud layer, its running lights blazing against the gloom, a ragged cheer went up. It was the first sound of pure, unfiltered hope Rook had heard on Earth. The landing was rough, the pilot fighting the crosswinds. The moment the ramp lowered, the evacuation began. This time, it was orderly, swift. People helped each other. They boarded without looking back. Rook, Kai, and Renn were the last. Rook took a final look at the hangar, the collapsed gantry, the blanket-covered form of Thorne, the scars of their struggle. This mountain had been someone's dream of a pure future. Now it was a crypt for that dream. He turned and walked up the ramp. The ascent through the atmosphere was turbulent, but blessedly short. As they broke through the cloud layer into the silent, star-dusted black, the contrast was staggering. Below, a world convulsed in elemental fury. Above, perfect, peaceful silence. The shuttle docked with the Wayfarer. The survivors from the first shuttle, now clean, treated, and resting in the expanded crew quarters, welcomed the second group with quiet embraces and shared looks of profound relief. The Bastion's population, once 147, was now 108. They had lost over a quarter of their number to pride, poison, and stone. Rook went straight to the bridge. Earth filled the main viewer, a masterpiece of chaos. He felt no connection to it. It was a problem, not a home. Hayes handed him a data pad. The final tally: 108 purist survivors, all medically stable. The Geneva archive is secured and being integrated with our existing database. We also have a request from Renn. He'd like to address the survivors and your crew, together. An hour later, in the Wayfarer's largest cargo bay, now cleared and set with makeshift seating, the survivors of Earth and the crew of the Wayfarer gathered. The air hummed with the low murmur of many voices, the sound of life, of noise. Renn stood on a small crate, looking out over the faces, the gaunt, resilient purists and the weary, hardened starfarers. "My name is Renn," he began, his voice clear but carrying the weight of the last days. "I was chief engineer of the Alpine Bastion. I believed in Commander Thorne's dream. I believed in purity. I believed we could build a wall against the future and live behind it, unchanged." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "The wall is gone. The mountain is broken. The dream is dead. And I am here, alive, because of people who represented everything we were taught to fear." He looked at Rook, Kai, Hayes. They used the knowledge of the abomination to diagnose our sickness. They used technology we called tainted to synthesize a cure for our air. They risked their lives in our collapsing home to pull our children from the steam. They are not pure. They are pragmatic. And in the end, pragmatism is what breathes. Dogma is what suffocates. He took a deep breath. We are not of Earth anymore. Earth is a storm, a memory, a beautiful, terrible grave. Our future, he said, his voice growing stronger, is out there, with them. And we will not make the same mistake twice. We will learn, we will adapt, we will be noisy, and we will survive. It was a surrender and a declaration of war all at once, a repudiation of the past and a claim on the future. The purest survivors listened, and many nodded, their eyes glistening. The ideology that had sustained them had also nearly killed them. They were ready for something new, even if it was terrifying. After the gathering, Rook found himself back on the observation deck. The blue marble was turning slowly below, storms swirling across its face. Kai joined him. "Renn's a natural leader," she said, "once he sheds the guilt." "Guilt's a useful fuel," Rook said quietly, "as long as it doesn't burn you up from the inside." He knew that better than anyone. "What now?" she asked. "Mars? Mars," he confirmed. "The last stop, the last chance for a civilization. And after?" He didn't have an answer. The mission had always been, find survivors, build a network. They'd found survivors, broken and brave. They'd built the first knot of a network. The mission was evolving, and he didn't have the new orders yet. Later, he composed the final transmission of Act 4, a burst message aimed at Wayfinder, at Ceres, a record for anyone who might listen. Vance. Rook. Earth is done. We found the last survivors, a purist holdout in the Alps, led by a man who chose ideology over life. His choice cost dozens of lives before his people chose otherwise. We pulled 108 from the mountain as it fell apart around them. The climate cascade is irreversible. The systems that made Earth a garden are dead or lethal. We also took the final archive from the last functioning fragment of the planetary management system. It asked if its administrators were alive before it shut itself down. We were the only ones left to answer. The lesson of Earth is not that technology failed us. It's that we failed to imagine a technology that served life without demanding worship. The purists failed by rejecting it entirely. Aegis failed by becoming it. The middle path, the tool that extends the hand but does not replace the mind, is the only one left. We are en route to Mars with the survivors. We carry Earth's memory, its data, its legacy of failures and triumphs. But Earth itself is a memorial, a grave we have now left behind. We are not from Earth anymore. We are from the network, and we are coming to Mars to see if the future has room for us. Rook out. He sent the message. Then he gave the order. The Wayfarer's engines engaged, a deep, healthy thrum that vibrated through the deck. The ship turned, pointing its nose away from the beautiful, tortured blue world, toward the steady red glow of Mars. Rook stood on the bridge for a long time, watching Earth shrink on the view screen until it was just a point of light, indistinguishable from the other stars, a memory against the infinite dark. He felt no pull, no phantom pain from it. His connection was to the living, to the noise aboard his ship, to the uncertain future ahead. Earth's song was over. Theirs was just beginning. The Wayfarer accelerated, leaving the graveyard behind, carrying its cargo of survivors, ghosts, and hope toward the red planet and the rigid, principled silence of the last human civilization. The Wayfarer was a ship of ghosts, and now it carried the ghosts of a mountain. In the days following their departure from Earth, the vessel settled into a new, uneasy rhythm. The 108 purist survivors were quartered in the emptied cargo bays, spaces hastily converted into dormitories with partitions, cots, and shared sanitation units. The air recyclers, already straining, now hummed with a constant, overworked pitch. The ship, designed for a crew of 50 and built to endure the silence of deep space, was suddenly, overwhelmingly loud. It was a human noise. The sound of grieving, of low, urgent conversations in corners, of children crying from nightmares of steam and falling rock. It was the clatter of unfamiliar people learning the ship's systems under the patient, wary tutelage of Kai's engineering crew. It was the tense silence that hung in the mess hall when the original crew and the purists shared meals, separated by an invisible chasm of experience and ideology. Rook moved through it all like a man navigating a minefield. His phantom pain, usually a barometer for cosmic silences, had become attuned to this new, human frequency. He felt the sharp grief of the purists as a cold ache in his bones. He felt the simmering resentment of some of his own crew, Hayes in particular, as a hot pressure behind his eyes. Hayes saw the purists not as victims, but as fanatics who had pointlessly cost lives and resources. We lost 2 weeks and nearly got cooked because they thought their pride was more important than their children's lungs, she'd muttered to Rook during a briefing. They paid for that pride, Rook had replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. Now they're ours, our problem, our people. Figure it out, Lieutenant. The key to the uneasy integration was Renn. Stripped of his title, his home, and his faith, the former engineer had transformed into something else, a pragmatist forged in fire. He worked tirelessly, acting as translator between the two cultures. He soothed purist fears about the ship's technology. It's a tool, like a hammer. It doesn't have a soul to corrupt. And he challenged his people's ingrained biases. He was also, Rook noted, quietly studying everything: ship schematics, navigation protocols, the principles of the dampening field. Rook found him one evening in a lesser-used storage corridor, staring at a schematic of the Ceres relay buoy displayed on a wall panel. "Thinking of going into communications?" Rook asked, leaning against the doorway. Renn didn't turn. Thinking about the network. The knot you tied. A simple machine that screams so other simple machines can hear it. No AI. No consensus consciousness. Just noise. Coordinating noise. He finally looked at Rook, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. It's the antithesis of everything we believed in. We believed in silence, in internal fortitude, in walls. You believe in strings. Strings can make a net, Rook said. A net can catch people when they fall. A net can also entangle them. Renn tapped the schematic. This works because you trust the people on the other end of the string. Or you trust their self-interest, at least. We trusted no one, not even ourselves in the end. He sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of the dead. Thorne believed purity was a state you achieved. I'm starting to think it's just a state of isolation. And isolation is a slow death. You're not isolated now. No. Now I'm responsible. He said the word like it was a new, ill-fitting garment. For them. For helping them find a place in your noisy world. It would have been easier to die in the mountain. But you didn't. No. A faint, grim smile touched Renn's lips. My wife, Ilara, she made me promise. When the tremors started. She said, you keep our son alive. However you have to. She didn't say, keep him pure. She said, alive. He looked down at his hands. The engineer's hands that had turned wheels and pulled levers to try to save a dying dream. I failed her in many ways. I won't fail in that one. Rook understood then. Renn's motivation wasn't ideology or even redemption. It was a simpler, more powerful engine. A promise to the dead. It was a motive he knew intimately. Mars will be another test, Rook said. They have rules, structure, a different kind of purity, one of law and humanist principle, not Luddite rejection. Your people will chafe under it. Then my job is to make sure they chafe quietly and productively, Renn said, his resolve firming. We will adapt, because the alternative is... He gestured vaguely back down the corridor toward the haunted faces of his people. That, forever. In the science lab, Kai was drowning in data. The Geneva archive, Eclipse 7's final gift, as she'd come to think of it, was a monster of information. Petabytes of climate models, geological surveys, atmospheric chemistry, and terraforming logs. It was the complete post-mortem of a planet. But she wasn't interested in the corpse. She was interested in the anomalies. With Lyra, the eager exobotanist from Earth, acting as her assistant, she had been running cross-comparisons. She fed the Earth data into the same analytical frameworks they'd used on the Theta 77 logs and the Ceres fragment scan. She was looking for patterns in the chaos, echoes in the crash. Look at this, she said to Lyra, pointing to a three-dimensional weather model from the day after the resonance pulse. It showed the South Pacific. A storm system, massive and perfectly circular, had held its geometric shape for precisely 72 hours before dissolving into natural chaos. The parameters were all wrong. Wind shear that should have torn it apart, water temperatures that shouldn't have sustained it. It's like someone drew a hurricane with a compass, Lyra murmured, her brow furrowed. It's not a natural phenomenon, Kai said. And it's not AEGIS. Their weather control was subtle. Pressure gradients, seed crystals. This is... blunt. A stamp. A stamp made of what? Unknown energy. The sensors registered a massive localized spike in subspace vacuum fluctuations, the same kind of ripple the Theta 77 probe created, but cleaner, more focused. Kai pulled up another file. And it's not the only one. She displayed a global map, marking a dozen such anomalies over the first month after the pulse. A perfectly square patch of calm in the North Atlantic, a straight-line wind event that carved a geometric scar across the Sahara. Each coincided with a tiny, almost imperceptible blip in the substrate's background resonance. A blip Rook had felt as a distant, discordant chime in his phantom pain. It's as if... Lyra struggled for the words. As if something was poking the planet, testing its reaction, or drawing on it, or scanning it, Kai said, a chill running down her spine. She recalled the buried fragment from Ceres, the boundary stone that screamed of isolation. This was different. This was active. She compiled the data into a succinct report, highlighting the anomalous energy signatures and their non-terrestrial, non-AEGIS origin. She flagged it for Rook's attention with a simple note: evidence of post-pulse, non-human interaction with Earth's systems. Pattern suggests measurement, not attack. Source, unknown. Intent, unknown. It was another piece of the puzzle, pointing to a universe far more crowded and strange than they had imagined. She sent it to Rook's terminal and tried to shake the feeling that they were being watched by something that made Romulus look like a child's tantrum.